Hey guys, welcome back to my show. In this episode, I have a really special guest with me. You may already know her from her podcast, I Missed Me. And I must say, it's a really empowering podcast that's all about self help, but also shows you that you are not alone in your journey. You always have someone supporting you. And here with us today is Mafe Anzures, the host of I Missed Me. Hi,
Hmm.
Mafe. How are you today?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I always love hopping on other podcasts and having these type of conversations. So thank you so much for the invite.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much again. Yeah, so please introduce yourself.
My name is Mafe Anzures. Like she said, I am the host of I Missed Me, and I started my podcast over 2 years ago because I was going through kind of a tough time mentally. And so I kind of realized that maybe I wasn't the only one going through, a breakup and heartbreak and all of the things that I was going through at the time. So I kind of started recording myself on my phone and I decided to turn it into a podcast for whoever could relate. And now I have a community of over 5 million people that currently listen to my podcast. And I don't know, it's great. It's my full-time job. I um, quit college. I dropped out of college a few months ago to fully pursue and make my podcast my full-time job. I also have a clothing brand called No Name Project, which purpose is to unite strangers and let everyone know that they're not alone in whatever it is that they're going through. And that's kind of a little bit of my background on who I am.
Yeah, I
What
love that. That's so cool, especially like the no name project that you have. I feel like it's a very unique thing to do because, of course, you're a podcast host, but like there's more to you than just that. And I think that's really interesting and empowering to think about, especially since the message behind the project was to kind of connect strangers and show them that just because, you're a stranger to me doesn't mean you're a stranger to others. You can be who you want to be without feeling judged, right?
Right. That's exactly the purpose behind everything that I do is just kind of connect everyone. We are in such a digital world that it allows a lot of space and facility for comparison and to think that, we are very far from whoever we see on the screen. And I think that we're actually closer than we think we are. So,
I completely agree. So like a lot of your content is based on like understanding like the idea of self-worth and like what so like and like the surrounding ideas. So what is your best advice for people struggling to find themselves?
I think my answer when it comes to this question of like finding yourself is just how would you or how you met your best friend or how would you meet a friend? How would you, how would you introduce yourself to a stranger? And that's just by asking questions. I've always said that you can't really become friends with someone without asking them questions, without getting to know them, without having conversations with them. And it kind of happens the same to ourselves. And I think that relationship with ourselves and that friendship with ourselves is very underrated. And yet it's the most important one. And so I would say for anyone who is kind of struggling with that journey of like loneliness and feeling like they don't have anyone, I would advise them to take the opportunity of being alone to ask questions with yourself, literally have conversations with yourself, get to know yourself. Ask yourself what you like, what you don't like, what are your boundaries, what are the things that make you happy, what are the things that don't make you happy, how can you avoid the things that don't make you happy, and just engaging in conversation with yourself, just like you engage and just like you enjoy having conversations with people and having conversations with your best friend or your boyfriend or your partner or whatever, have that same conversation with yourself, get to know yourself, ask yourself questions, and then those conversations are going to lead you to realize that the only person that will only like that can truly get to know yourself as deeply as you can is yourself. So I think that that was kind of for me. I started having a lot of conversations with myself. That's ultimately how it led me to like start the podcast. And then I kind of realized that I hated myself, kind of to put it in like quote unquote hated myself for a very long time just because I didn't take that time to like have conversations with myself. But after I did, I kind of realized that I didn't suck as much as I thought I did. And there was no reason to hate myself as much as I was hating myself, I just had to get to know myself a little bit better.
Honestly, like you kind of hit the nail on that one. I feel like personally for me as well, being a teenager is like the hardest phase of life. And I know that's kind of like a hot take because like, there at this moment this seems like the biggest thing. A lot of times, like especially what you're saying, right? Learning to talk to yourself, learning to be alone. For me, I am rarely on my own. And when I am on my own, I'm like doing work. So I think just knowing that having that alone time where you're not doing anything, just sitting with yourself in peace and like thinking, okay, how was my day today? What can I change about today? What can I do better in the future? Just asking those questions and like being like your own supporter really or your own best friend is very important because yeah, sure you can have support systems, but at the end of the day, they will move on their own journey and you will be on your own figuring out your life for what it is.
Exactly.
And so, the idea of like hate, right? Hate can come in so many forms. It can be self-hatred, like how you mentioned, or it can just be feeling like other people hate you. So, what would you, what would your advice or like your process be behind breaking the mentality that you are not good enough, or people think you're not good enough, or that you are stupid or a fool or just someone who cannot do things right? How do you break that mentality?
I think uh we live in this like victim space, and sometimes I think that we do it for other people. I truly feel like if you are going to spend the rest of your life with yourself, you can't truly hate yourself. Like somebody that says that they hate themselves, I think is just for people to feel bad for them or to put this image out there that you're not good enough or seeking validation or seeking maybe compliments. But I don't think that there is a person that can truly sit down in the dark with themselves and be like, I hate myself. There's just simply no way. And if there is, then you really have to switch that mindset, not for others, but for yourself. Like, do you really want to spend the rest of your life with someone that you hate? Because that truly would be the concept of like, you're gonna spend the rest of your life with yourself. Why would you want to hate yourself? Like, even if you actually do, even if you actually do hate yourself, ask why would you want to hate yourself for the rest of your life? Like just how we advise people to get out of toxic relationships, or maybe you have that one friend that is telling you how bad and how toxic and how horrible their boyfriend is, and you're like, why are you with them? Like, why do you want to keep, why do you want to stay in that toxic relationship that keeps bringing you pain and that keeps torturing you and that keeps manipulating you? And why would you want the rest of your life to be like that? We have to ask that same question with ourselves if our relationship with ourselves is toxic. Like, why would we want that? Why don't you fix it? Why don't you get to know yourself? Why don't you start acting different with yourself? Why don't you start being nice to yourself? Like, why would you want to live in a toxic relationship with yourself? And the answer will always be, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And hopefully it is, because nobody wants to live in pain forever, right? So when you start asking, that's why I think self-conversation is so important. But when you really truly ask the question to yourself of like, do I really want to hate myself for the rest of my life? The answer is just simply no. So get out of that victim mentality, because nobody's going to get you out of that, and truly decide that if you're going to spend the rest of your life with yourself, you can't really hate yourself or you're going to be miserable for the rest of your life. And like, who really wants that? And start working on the relationship that you have with yourself.
Honestly, again, like all of these things that you're saying, like in the idea or the span of time when we think about this, yeah, it seems like it's easy, right? But like when you say this, it's like really important too. Like some people just need that like feeling of like feeling validated, which I feel all the time. I feel like the idea of being a victim, quote unquote, the victim really is just the idea of, trying to figure out an excuse or a way to make yourself feel better. But again, it varies person to person. Some people actually do feel that way, as you said, but it also matters in how you tackle it. Like your method, honestly, is the best method. Like questions and making sure that if you are living with yourself, which you are, I mean, as long as you're alive, you are with yourself. Your soul is intact to you and you are the one living. And so if you hate yourself, you're essentially choosing a life where there's always going to be pain and struggle and like this two, not even a two-sided battle, but a one-sided battle with just yourself. And I think everything you said just hits everything on the nail, as I said earlier. Like It's just very important to hear all of this. And when someone else says it, you kind of feel like it creates a bigger impact often.
Exactly.
And so, we talked a little bit about toxic relationships with ourselves. Now, in terms of toxic relationship in general, how do you deal with rejection?
I think I love the topic of perspective, and I love the topic of not being a victim of life, because I think that we tend to do that a lot, consciously or unconsciously. I think that we get a lot of, as human beings, we get a lot of satisfaction from other people's validation, in the sense of like, if I put myself, like if I get rejected, I get to be sad. And because I get to be sad, I get the opportunity for people to tell me, "Oh no, don't be sad. You are actually enough." Like we just put ourselves in this victim space
Yeah,
for people around us to tell us what we want to hear, but we're subconsciously destroying ourselves because we're actually convincing ourselves that we are worthy of being rejected. But when you get out of that victim space of like, you know what, regardless of what I'm going through or regardless of who is rejecting me, I know that I am enough. And you just simply don't care about people's validation and don't care about being a victim because you give yourself your own validation. You kind of learn how to see rejection from a different perspective. And I love to call it protection. I have learned based on experiences I've went through that whenever I feel like I'm getting rejected or whenever I go through something I didn't really want to go through, life always ends up replacing it with something better. A relationship of mine that didn't work out, and I really did not understand the breakup at the moment. And then I started my podcast and I went through this whole healing journey. I'm like, wow, if I wouldn't have gone through that breakup that almost led me to, the end of me, I would not have this podcast. I would not have my clothing brand. I would not be dating the amazing person I'm dating today. So it's just like I look back at what made me really sad at one point, and it led me to what makes me really happy now. And so that is just kind of another tip of realizing that whatever is making you sad right now, like the reason why you're sad right now is going to be the reason as to why you're happy in the future.
that's honestly like such a unique way to put it, right? Make your pain your journey. I'm pretty sure that I said that wrong, but I'm sure there was like
Mhm.
this code, right? Your pain brings you joy, something like that. I'm not sure what it was, but like it kind of talks about, right, that your obstacles. Once you face the obstacles, there is an end inside. There's never like you're never stuck. I mean, you will be, but it's part of life. If we have a plain road and everything is going great, then what's the fun in that? That's the way I like to think about things sometimes. It's when I feel like, rejection everywhere. Um, both ways, relationship wise, school wise, asking people for interviews and they reject you, that kind of thing. Like rejection often, I feel like when it happens to me in that moment, it's like, oh my God, I feel like the worst person ever. I do
Hmm.
not deserve this. I'm totally worthless and I do not deserve the love of this person or this opportunity because I'm not qualified enough. But then once you think about self-worth, you are doing so much. You are having a podcast, you're having your own clothing brand, and all of that kind of is like you. If you are happy with yourself, what does it matter what this XYZ person says or what Joan of Arc or anyone, I don't know why I said Joan of Arc, but like just anyone said about you.
Hello, hello.
Oh, sorry. Yes, like it's just, as you said, like everything you say right now, it's just so important to understand. It's so important to like kind of dig into ourselves and say that we are good enough. We do not need people to tell us we're good enough. We do not need to act like the victim. And I know I do that all the time. I'm always playing victim and always being like, oh, this happened to me. This happened to me today. This happened to me yesterday. This happened to me now. Always like, coming up with some new thing to obsess over or something that may not even be that bad, honestly.
Exactly. Just always everything, just remember that everything always will lead you to something better.
Absolutely. And so we kind of talked about toxic relationships, we talked about like, rejection, and we talked all these things. Now, this podcast was intended mainly for like young people at first, and then, there's no set definition what young means really. Honestly, young is just someone who feels like, bright and bubbly, and it's really just any age. So basically, what I'm trying to say is we have a lot of people in their 20s listening to this podcast, and so for them, there's always like relationship stuff that they go through, life stuff they go through. And so, what's your number one advice for letting people go? When do you know it's the right time to let someone go and get them out of your head, especially when they've already rejected you?
I think just coming to terms and accepting the fact that letting people go means letting people in, but letting something go means letting something in. Like there's nothing in life that ends without something else starting. Even if what is starting is the journey of the ending, the healing journey of the ending of whatever it is that you went through, even that is a start. Even that is a new beginning. And in that new beginning, you're gonna meet people. You're gonna make new relationships. You're gonna meet new places. Just because one relationship didn't work out doesn't mean that like you haven't met all the people that are going to love you yet. You have so many years ahead of you. You have so many places to visit. You just have so many events and so many circumstances and so many experiences to live with and without someone, that minimizing your life and everything that you still have to live to just one relationship that didn't work out, or one person that decided to leave your life is just very unfair to what your whole life is actually composed of. And so I think when it comes to letting go, number one, remember that your life is so much more than a person, than a relationship, than a feeling, than an emotion, that like your life is so much more. There are so many people that love you, so many people that care for you, so many opportunities and so many experiences that make up your life and that make you happy as well. And number two, that letting go is also letting in, and an ending of a version of you is just the beginning of a new one.
The whole idea, as I said earlier, like honestly, like this is why I love your podcast so much. Like every time you talk, like, there's always something that you say that's so not even informative. It's like empowering. And that's the word to use here because everything you say is true, right? Um, for frozen lovers out there, you might have heard of the term love is an open door. And
Mhm.
people are like, well, love is romantic often. Well, no, love is for yourself, self-love. There's friend like platonic loves and all those things. And so I feel like when you say that every time it's like almost like a every closed door opens a new door somewhere else. Maybe not in this industry or this area, but this person rejecting you, this person not wanting you may open a new area where like someone new comes along and you have a great life. And then, you're having a big company, you have like, a whole life built around a new person. In fact, when I mean built around someone, I mean this idea of someone. Because really, if you think about it, apart from yourself, there's really no one who really sticks along with you for the whole journey. Even your family members or your siblings or your friends, they're with you, but not really with you. Their journey is only however long you take them with you. Whereas with you, you're attached to yourself. You are if you go to Europe, your soul is coming along with you. If you go to if you go to Australia or wherever, gonna come along with you. It's not gonna leave you, right? Until like, the end of time. Which I think is definitely like something that stems existential crises for a lot of people.
Yeah. Um, and I think that's the most beautiful part, understanding that just like there can be an ending and a beginning of relationships in your life and of so many things, there's a lot of endings and beginnings of yourself all throughout your life. Like I love to say that we restart and we die multiple times in our lives. Like we don't just die once. Our body leaves Earth once, but we die and we are born, and a new version of it, and a new version of us is born, and a version of us dies. Like we die multiple times in our lives. And I think that that is just a very beautiful concept to understand that maybe changing and having to let go and I don't know, just relationships ending or a period of our lives ending is not a bad thing because a lot of things are going to have to die multiple times in our lives for the rest of our life.
Absolutely. That's again, circle of life is just so beautiful because it's all often very deep too. Like a lot of people do not understand. I still am, kind of figuring out how this works, but like it's just so interesting to think about and so like impactful because you just do not know how things work because there's no set way of thinking about it. People have different views on this and like often people call it controversial. I don't know why. But like, it's almost a taboo topic because not a lot of people want to talk about the circle of life because they're either afraid of that feeling or just do not understand the concept. So it's definitely like a very important thing, and I'm glad you brought this up.
Hmm.
Thank you so much, Mafe, for coming on my podcast. I loved having you here and hearing you talk about, the circle of life, fear of rejection, and just self-worth and self-love and all things self-help. Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you so much for having me, and I hope this episode was helpful and you guys can carry it. And I impacted a little bit of you and your hearts to whoever listened. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Now, before you go, where can listeners find you online?
I have a podcast called I Missed Me podcast on all streaming platforms. You can find me as Mafe Anzures, Mafeanzures on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. You can find my podcast again, Instagram, TikTok, all streaming platforms. And if you want to go check out my clothing brand, go to nonameproject.co to get your hoodie.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll be linking some links into the show description. Be sure to check that out. I hope you all learned something new from this episode, and I'll see you all next week. Happy
Thank
listening.
you so much.